What's going on, guys? In this video I'm going to show you how to process and resample a drum loop to get some really fat textures and glitchy sound effects for your tracks. I recorded me smashing some pots and pans in my kitchen. I processed those sounds and made a drum loop out of it, and I'll post a link in the description where you can download that drum loop for yourself. I'll show you a few different ways that you can go about doing this, and that's all using non-paid third-party plugins or stock FL Studio stuff in Patcher. And then I'll also show you how I implement some of that stuff in my own tracks. So this first layer is probably the least interesting of all the layers in my opinion, but it's sort of the noisy top end layer. It gives me a good chance to already show you some of the plugins that I'll be using for this and the basic idea behind it. Now we're going to use Vocodex to add some more texture and noise and character to the sound. So first we want to turn up the noise pass-through up here, so we get some white noise at the top to kind of round out the sound and make it a little bit less harsh. And we're going to turn off this button and play around with the release and adjust it to taste. So now I'm going to stretch out the sound, or actually take down the BPM so that our loop is playing slower, just because I like the vibe of playing it at a little bit of a slower BPM. And I'm also going to flatten the loop, so consolidate it or render it to audio. Then I'll reverse it, and I'm going to sidechain it to the original drum track. So I'm bringing in the original drums and sending it to the mixer and creating a sidechain to our new track. And with the limiter, I'm just going to bring up the ratio and take down the threshold and adjust the release until I have something that sounds about right. So after flattening the audio and adjusting the sidechain a little bit, here's what we have. So let's recap this section real quick. So basically we've added a few plugins that focus on giving it character, and we focused on the high end, distorting, mangling, adding with noise unit and Vocodex. This process for you should be experimental and don't try to follow exactly the steps I'm doing, which is why I'm not showing every single knob I'm tweaking. It's more about the experimentation to getting to those textures and what you can use. So those are the tools that I like to use and that really work for me to get some alien squelchy sounds. So let's move on to the next layer. The next layer is going to be a little bit more percussive. The way we're going to do this is with a granulizer. So there's a lot of Granulizer plugins out there and some pretty expensive ones at that, but FL Studio comes with its own Granulizer plugin and it's been in FL Studio for ages, over 10 years. I believe it's become one of its legacy plugins, in fact. With the Granulizer plugin, we're going to play around with the knobs and some of the settings until we find a position that sounds interesting so that we can start to get some more expressions out of the loop that we've tossed in here. Once I've found a position that I'm happy with, I'm going to open up Edison. And a little pro tip, if you press Shift and E with a mixer track selected, it'll open up Edison ready to record. So I'm going to open Edison, arm it for recording, and I'm going to play with the Granulizer. It helps to play more than one key at the same time, so I'm playing, for example, two Cs an octave apart, or you can play different notes. It doesn't really matter. Just experiment with whatever kinds of tones you can get out of it. So for this next part, I'm going to take my audio file that I've just recorded, and I'm going to go to Chop, Time-Based, and select these. And that's just going to make it a little bit easier for me to get some segments going that I can kind of skim through. So I'm going to use the skim tool and just sort of look for the parts that kind of catch my ear. And I'm throwing a lot at this loop right now, but that's just, again, part of the experimentation phase, because a lot of things are going to be kind of off rhythm. It's now just about picking out the good bits that you like and putting them in places in your loop or in your beat that already fit. So that's another stage complete. There's still a lot of things we can do with this, but we already have a lot of texture, and that's just from a single drum beat. In this part, we're going to spend some more time with the individual clips that we've picked out. So there's a few different techniques that I like to use when I'm resampling and kind of making these glitchy effects. So of course fades are going to be super useful and super important, but there's also a lot of built-in pre-computed and legacy effects in a sampler, like pogo, which will kind of change pitch and stretching at the same time with sort of this envelope, it seems. So of course chopping as well is going to be super useful for that, and in general doing a lot of what we've already been doing to the sound, to the whole loop, but now to these individual samples, so we can make them unique and stretch them and change them and process them even more. And when it comes to post-processing these samples more, Vocodex and the disperser really help in making that sort of dripping kind of resonated sound. After that, we can use some reverb or delay to put it more in a space, or delay can be great for rhythmic effects as well. But all in all, that's where more of the creativity comes in, and trying to see it like a painting or a puzzle where you're moving things around, stretching, and like clay, kind of forming it to do what you need it to do at that point. So after spending about an hour just going through chopping things up a bit more and using a lot of pitching down and up in pogo and stretching, I managed to get some really cool glitchy transitions and rhythmic sort of effect percussive elements. I'm pretty happy with this session that I had for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it and got some cool ideas out of it, or at least some plugin ideas, patcher effect ideas, and yeah, that you found it at least entertaining to see some of the workflow ideas that I have.